was teaching some of the chapters from the Bodhisattva's Way of Life by Shantideva, and he asked the audience all to memorize this verse. So this is one verse that I've memorized and then recite on a daily basis. But His Holiness recites it. I mean, he often quotes it and explains it because it kind of it summarizes in a big way some of the main, one of the main points of the Buddha's teachings, which we've been talking about a lot. So this talks about how, basically how the afflictive emotions arise from ignorance, and then from that, arise from ignorance. So there's ignorance, and then that gives rise to afflictive emotions, and that gives rise to karma, and it's because of that that we circle in samsara, and it's by eliminating karma and afflictive emotions that we achieve liberation. But it adds in one fourth step. So there's ignorance, and then afflictive emotions, karma we've already spoken about. But in between ignorance and afflictive emotions, there's one other step added, which Chandrakirti also speaks about, and then Lama Tsongkhapa explains in his commentary, illuminating the thought on Chandrakirti's entrance to the middle way. So the one additional step is called, here it's called concepts. So why don't I read the verse and then I'll explain a little bit more, and then we do a meditation to try to get some sense of it in our own experience. So the verse goes like this, it's just 4 lines. By exhausting karma and afflictive emotions, there is liberation. Right? By exhausting karma and afflictive emotions, there is liberation. Karma and afflictive emotions come from concepts. Those come from elaboration. Elaboration is ceased by emptiness, or elaboration is ceased in emptiness. So the first one we've already discussed, the topic, what's expressed by the first one we've already discussed. That by exhausting karma and afflictive emotions, there is liberation. So then, where do karma and afflictive emotions come from? He says they come from concepts. And then those concepts come from elaboration. Here, elaboration means ignorance, actually, the ignorance grasping at true existence. So he puts in one step between ignorance. So what I want to meditate on together with you is how do our afflictive emotions, we can easily identify our anger, irritation, anxiety or fear, afflictive doubt and confusion, arrogance, jealousy, and like greed or craving as something. But so what I want to meditate together with you on is it true that those always arise from ignorance, specifically from the ignorance which grasps at a solid sense of self, and it's like instinctively feels that self is more important than anything else, so which is self-centeredness. So is it true that they arise from that? But the step that's added here between self-grasping ignorance and afflictive emotions is here just called concepts. But actually there's a more full expression of that in the term Somen Yije Nando. So it means incorrectly believing concepts which wrongly believe something. So here what they wrongly believe is that objects which we perceive as attractive, that they are attractive from their own side, irregardless of our opinion or irregardless of our projection of attractiveness on them. Right? So when we have ignorance grasping at a self, then we perceive objects, say, as attractive, and then we believe that attractiveness is really there in the object, that it's a property of the object, right? So, like, if you take any particular food, so take a food that you find like delicious or you're attracted to, if the deliciousness of that food really was a property of the food, then anybody who perceives it, anybody who experiences it should experience it in the same way. You know, like if you have really moist chocolate cake, anybody who experiences it is going to experience it as moist, right? Or pudding, say chocolate pudding. Nobody's going to taste chocolate pudding and say, oh, it's really dry. I mean, maybe it's dry for pudding, but it's not dry like flour or something like, or bread or something like that. That moisture is a property of the chocolate pudding. But the deliciousness is not, right? Some people might be allergic to eggs or allergic to milk or something, or just don't like chocolate or don't like that kind of I don't know, sticky, mushy kind of texture of pudding. And they're not going to experience it as delicious. They might find it revolting. So if the deliciousness was really a property of the chocolate pudding in the way that we perceive it is, it looks like deliciousness is there. It's out there. We don't think it comes from our mind. So that's an example of an incorrectly believing concept, right? When we see something as attractive or unattractive, it works the same way. And we feel that attractiveness, or we believe that attractiveness or unattractiveness is a property of the thing that we perceive in that way. We don't recognize that attractiveness or unattractiveness to be just a projection of our mind. And then it's based on that belief, that believing, that then we become attached to and we start craving for. Or we be craving for things that we think are like inherently attractive, or we start becoming averse to and angry at, or disliking things that we perceive to be inherently unattractive or displeasing, right? So does that make sense? So that's what I want to analyze before I ask you to sort of explain if it makes sense or not. So there's these 4 steps. First we have ignorance, grasping at inherently existent self, and inherently existing other. Then we have this mistakenly believing concept that things are either attractive or unattractive from their own side, that's a property of those things. And then we either become attracted to and attached to and craving and grasping for things that we perceive as pleasant, or averse to and disliking and wanting to push away, disgusted with things that we perceive as unpleasant. And then on the basis of that, so we have attachment and we have anger, and then on the basis of that we engage in actions and create karmas, right? Yeah. You have
So did the chocolate pudding? I didn't create that with my mind. That is something that's external from me, correct? It's been. Okay,
Yeah.
Well, I have some part in since I'm interacting with it. Is it part of my causes and conditions, or is that something? How does, yeah.
Well, it depends. If it's chocolate pudding that you made, then it's a result of you. If it's chocolate pudding that somebody else made, then...
Even the chocolate pudding that I created, because I'm really...
When you make chocolate pudding at home?
I'm really not, I exist in a certain way, but not really. I'm really empty.
Well, hold on. Yeah.
So I'm just wondering, is that,
Being empty of inherent existence doesn't mean we don't exist. We all exist. We exist in the way we kind of, in a very ordinary way, but we exist as conventions. But everything exists in that way, right?
Is that chocolate, everything external from me is not a projection of my mind?
No. It's not that everything we perceive is just a projection of your mind.
No, it isn't.
Like you could have hallucinations. You could hallucinate hearing sounds or seeing things. And how do you know if those are just projections of your mind or not, is if other people can perceive them or not. If you're saying, oh, do you hear that, that voice is telling me to do something, and other people around you don't hear that voice, then you can infer that, oh, that's just a projection of my mind, right? But the chocolate pudding is like, we all see it, we can all experience it. If there's a bowl of chocolate pudding in the room, like we can all see and experience it, right? So that's something that has external existence, but its existence still depends upon mental imputation. But that doesn't mean it's just a projection of our mind, right? There's a difference.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. So do you think you understand this? There's this 4-step process. First we have ignorance, grasping at self, then that leads to incorrectly believing concepts, that we believe that attractiveness, the properties of attractiveness or unattractiveness are really in the things we perceive. You can use people as well, people you perceive. And then based on that, we generate craving and attachment for things we like, or things we perceive as attractive, and then aversion and anger towards things we perceive as unattractive. And then based on that, we create karmas, we create karmic actions. Okay? So let's meditate on that. Just try to think through it for yourself and try to use examples where you felt some strong afflictive emotion arise. Did it come from incorrectly believing concepts? Did it come from ignorance? And then what karmic actions did I create out of that? Right? So get comfortable in your meditation posture. We'll meditate for about 10 minutes. And then try to think through that whole process. Right? So the first thing to think about really is, how is it that afflictive emotions arise from ignorance? Is it really the case that every instance of an afflictive emotion arises from ignorance or not? And if it is, how is it that they arise from ignorance? How are those two related? That ignorance grasping at self, and then how does that lead to attachment, anger, and so forth? So use some specific examples from your own experience and try to get some clarity about that. And then another thing to think about, if you'd like to move on, is, okay, so we have ignorance, grasping at truly existent self, giving rise to anger, giving rise to incorrectly believing concepts, which give rise to anger and attachment and the other afflictive emotions. And then those give rise to karma. So think how the afflictive emotions compel us to engage in actions through which we create karma, and intentional actions of our body, speech, and mind, through which we create karma. And then how those karmas put imprints in the mind, like seeds, which have the potency to ripen in the future as pleasant and unpleasant, and or happy and suffering experiences. So try to imagine that the second part of that process, how afflictive emotions give rise to karmic actions, intentional actions, which are virtuous or non-virtuous or neutral. And then how the imprints of those actions are planted in the stream of consciousness, or in the continuum of consciousness, and how they travel from life to life. Right? So is that the case, the Buddhist explanation? It doesn't seem like it's that way or not. Why or why not? And then also try to relate it to your own personal experiences, and try to imagine how that might be. Right? Try to fill in the picture in terms of your own experience. So take another 5 minutes or so. were there any questions arose from your reflection on those questions? Usually thinking about some questions leads to more questions.
So what's before ignorance?
What's before ignorance?
Yeah.
More ignorance.
More ignorance.
Yeah, in terms of this wheel of cause and effect, there's nothing before that, no. And in terms of the continuum of our own ignorance, there is no beginning. It's not like in the past we were totally free from ignorance and then somehow it arose. There's no beginning to it. Yeah. Okay. So I explained each of the 12 links briefly. But just to get a sense more like how this actually works in our lives. So think about, like in this life, imagine we create, so in this life, we're alive now, then we have this innate grasping at true existent self, and a concrete, solid self. And then, let's say through the force of just ignorance or maybe attachment to having a happier state of life, then we, let's say we create a virtuous karma, right? A karma to take rebirth as a human being. The main cause to take rebirth as a human being is by practicing pure morality. Right? Practicing pure morality is the main cause to take rebirth as a human, together with generosity, but morality is the main one. So imagine that we take a vow like not to kill any animal, not to kill anything whatsoever. And then we keep that vow, right? So then taking and keeping this vow not to kill is a virtuous, something virtuous, right? So then ignorance, and then by keeping the vow, we create the imprint. Every time we're keeping that vow not to kill, like maybe, there's a mosquito biting us and instead of killing it, we just shoo it away. Or there's insects in our kitchen, instead of killing them, we just trap them and take them outside. So every time there's an opportunity to kill something, and then we refrain from doing that, we create another karma of a virtuous karma of keeping this vow not to kill, and also the karma of not killing. Actually, that's one of the benefits of keeping vows, is that then when you do things that are naturally virtuous, you both do the thing that's naturally virtuous, like not killing, not harming the life of others is a natural virtue. But then because you have the vow, you're also keeping the promise that you made. You're also keeping a vow. So it becomes two virtuous actions, actually. So it's more powerful. But okay, so we have ignorance grasping at self, and then we create the karma, this virtuous karma of not killing. And then there's imprints of that planted in the mind stream. So at each time those imprints are planted, then there's the third link in the chain, or the third link, of dependent arising. So there's ignorance, and then the karma, and then consciousness at the time of the cause, right? The consciousness which holds that imprint. So imagine we've created those in this life. And then, so then we have to jump to, that karma ripening. So then imagine at the end of this life, then, we have, let's say we experience a pleasant, so let's say we die a very peaceful death, right? So say we die a very peaceful death, but at the end of our death, we're remembering our kind family and friends, and have pleasant feelings, remembering them, and we have a kind of craving at and grasping not to be parted with them, but to stay together with them, right? So that then is the links, what number is it? I think it's 3, 7, 8. So feeling is 8, right? Sorry, feeling is 7. So there's that feeling, which we'll come back to, but that craving is 8, 9, and 10. Craving, grasping, and becoming. So then those 3 are called the actualizing links, right? The first 3 links are the projecting links. So they project the karma. That karma is planted in our mind stream. And then for that karma to become actualized, or to bear its fruit, to bear its result, it has to come together with the conditions of craving, grasping, and becoming, right? So we have craving not to be parted with and to be with our family and friends again, and then grasping at that. And then that causes our karma to take rebirth as a human being. So this karma that we created through the practicing pure morality of not killing, is a karma to be born as a human being. That causes that karma to ripen, just like the seed that's just about to produce its first sprout. So this karma is just about to produce a rebirth. That's the link of becoming, which is the ninth. And then, in the very next moment, we take rebirth. So imagine we take a human rebirth again. So at that time then, the 11th link of rebirth and also the 4th link of name and form, they're established at the same time. Okay? And that is the first moment of our next life. Right? So we're imagining that the complete 12 links we're going to complete in 2 lifetimes. Right? So in this lifetime, we have ignorance, karma, or composition, what's it called? Compositional factors, condition factor, formative factors, or karma. So there's ignorance, karma, the second link, and then the third link of the consciousness, which has the karmic imprint on it. That's in this life. And then at the end of this life, in that same chain of, that same set of 12 links, then we have craving, grasping, and becoming. Right? And then in the immediate next life, the first moment of that next life, is the 11th link of becoming, and the 4th link of name and form are established at the same time. And then, so that's at the moment of conception, the first moment of conception. And then as we develop as an embryo in a mother's womb, then we develop the 6 sense powers, and then contact with objects. And so from the very second moment, aging and death, aging already began. And then we develop the 6 sense powers, contact with objects, and then we again develop feelings, right? Pleasant or unpleasant feelings. And then at the time we die from that life, then the 12th link is completed, is the link of death, right? So that's how the 12 links can be completed within 2 lifetimes. But they can also be completed within 3 lifetimes. So, okay, first of all, does the 2 lifetimes make sense? You think you have it straight? First we have ignorance, like we have now, then we create karma. So say we create the karma of not killing, taking a vow not to kill, and then there's imprints of that karma on the mind stream. So there's the first 3 links complete, and then at the end of this life, as we come to an end of this life, so then there's the what's called the actualizing links of craving, grasping, and becoming. Those arise. So we crave to not be parted from our family and friends, to take a human rebirth or again, or just to be a human, and then we grasp at that, and then that kind of activates our karma to take rebirth as a human. Okay, so there's those 3 actualizing links. So the first 3 of ignorance, karma, and then the consciousness are called the projecting links. Right? They project this karma, and then what actualizes or makes that karma ripen are called the actualizing links. So craving, grasping, and then becoming. So those are all within one life, in this life. They happen in this life. And then in the very next moment is our next life begins, with the 11th link, rebirth, and the 4th link, name and form, arising at the same time at the moment of conception. At the moment of conception, in the womb of the mother of our future life, there's name and form and rebirth happen at the same time. And then from the very next moment, aging begins. So that's part of the 12th link. And then also, gradually we develop the 6 sense powers, means our eyes, ears, nose, tongue. And then when those are fully developed, they make contact with objects. So we see, hear, taste, smell things. We've already been touching things from the very beginning. And then those give rise to feeling, pleasant, unpleasant feelings in that life. Still, that life's not complete, but when that life ends at death, then the 12th link is complete. Right? Then they're all complete. So that's how in 2 lives you can complete the whole 12 links. But they can also be completed in 3 lives. So just keep with the same example of we have ignorance in this life, then we create karma of not killing, and there's the consciousness at the time of the cause which has imprints on it. So that's the first 3 links. And then imagine imagine as we die from this life, then we have craving, grasping, and becoming, but it's not related to this karma at all. It activates some other karma. So that's not part of this 12 links. That would become part of a different set of 12 links related to some other karma, right? And then many, many, many lifetimes can pass like that, where this karma we've created just remains dormant in our mind stream and continues riding on the consciousness from life to life to life. And then in some future life, so this is going to be, and then in some future life, at the time we die, then the craving, grasping, and becoming that activate that specific karma, they happen, right? So that becomes, so that's the second life. The first lifetime is this lifetime when we created that karma. Then many lives happen where that karma is just dormant and nothing happens to it. Then in some future lifetime, there is a craving, grasping, and becoming that activate that karma we created in this life, right? So that's the second lifetime. And then we take rebirth through the force of that newly activated karma, and then that rebirth is the third lifetime, right? So in that lifetime, it's just the same. Then there's the link of rebirth, name and form, established at the time of conception. From the second moment, there's aging, and then gradually the sixth sense consciousness, sixth sense sources develop. Then contact happens, and then again we have feelings, pleasant, unpleasant, neutral feelings. And then when we die from that life, then the 12th link is complete with death, right? So that's how we complete the entire 12 links over. It's impossible to complete in one lifetime, right? Because you have to die and take rebirth for them to be complete, right? So the minimum is 2 lifetimes, but it can take maximum 3 lifetimes. But there can be many other lifetimes intervening where those links, that specific set of links, are not happening, but other links are happening. Okay? Yeah, Jeff.
What makes it a throwing karma?
Yeah, so what makes something a throwing karma is that, well, I mean, the etymology is that it has the power to throw rebirth. So what makes a karma have that kind of power is it's a complete karma. So it's complete, for a karma to be complete, there has to be 4 aspects that are complete. So let me see if I can remember them all. First of all, we have to correctly identify like a basis. So let's say we're going to create a karma of not killing someone, then or something. We have to correctly identify that it's a living thing and it's possible for it to be killed and what it is and that we're not going to kill it. Then there has to be, well, first identify the basis for a living thing that we're not going to kill. It's just quite simple. The object. So there has to be the correct object, and then because say we see like a very well made like doll or stuffed animal, and we think, oh, I'm not going to kill it, and I'm going to practice not killing in relation to that, but it actually is not alive. So still there's some virtuous karma, but it's not complete because it's actually not a living thing that's possible to kill. So first we have to correctly identify the object, and then we have to have the intention not to do that thing. So if we just unintentionally don't kill something, that's not complete. It has to be intentionally done, and there has to be, and then we actually have to engage in the action of not killing, and we have to complete it. It means it has to be complete action. Like we have to, while we're still alive, we have to actually, well, not kill it basically, and I guess you can think the circumstances in which we would kill that thing come to an end, like the mosquito like flies away or something, like.
So to go back, if you take the vow not to kill,
Yeah.
if it never comes up to kill,
Yeah.
you're gaining some benefit, but you're not creating a complete karma until you run across these circumstances
Yeah.
where you could kill. Right?
Well, just taking the vow is itself like a karma.
Right.
But then the actual fulfilling the vow of not killing, yeah, you have to meet the circumstances.
Okay, so
Yeah.
we've met. So I took the vow not to kill, and I chose not to kill somebody today.
Yeah.
Okay? And I completed that by not killing that person, and I moved on.
Yeah.
So that person is or is not part of that karma. In other words,
Yeah.
so I was asking you before, what makes the connection 4 eons later
Mhm.
for the ripening of a karma that I create today,
Mm.
that the circumstances, the environment for that ripening occur all the time in our daily lives,
Yeah.
right? Time after time after time after time, but this one hasn't ripened.
Yeah.
And is that because of the relationship to the being that I didn't kill, or is there some other, what I'm confused about is what, 7 eons later, all of a sudden the environment that I'm used to all the time arises and this karma ripens, but what makes this particular karma ripen as opposed to the one I created yesterday?
Right. Well, yeah. Let me kind of. First of all, the subtle workings of karma are a very hidden phenomena, right?
I know,
So,
I accept that.
yeah, but generally there's a pattern for how karmas ripen, right? So this is taught in one sutra. It's said to be like if there's a bunch of cows in a barn trying to get out, then the order in which the cows get out of the barn. The one closest to when the door suddenly opens, imagine there's a lot of cows in a barn, the door suddenly opens, the one closest to the door is going to get out first. So like that, usually it's the karma that we created most recently is more likely to ripen first. But then there's two karmas that we created recently and they're of equal strength, then the stronger one will ripen first. If there's two ones that are equal recent, equal strength, but the one who has more habituation, like the cow who's been out in and out the door many times and kind of knows how to do that, is going to be able to go out better. So similarly, the karmas that we have stronger habituation to, we've done more repeatedly, they're going to ripen first.
Does the strength come from the power of the intention?
Yeah, the strength primarily comes from the power of the intention, but it can also come from like repeatedly doing that thing again and again and again. Then it subsequently becomes stronger. But it's not that it's not like every action adds up to one, every instance of stealing or killing adds up to one karma of killing. It's that say, when you're kids and you steal something the first time, you do so with a lot of kind of trepidation and nervousness. But as you do again, as you might do again and again and again, you become more emboldened by it and just do it. So subsequent instances of doing something that we're habituated to, they're stronger than the earlier instances of doing it, of creating the karma. So there's also that kind of force at play.
I understand all that. Well, I don't really, but I accept all that.
Yeah.
But then the separation
Yeah. through
of today's activity for 17 eons is caused by, because the conditions are always there.
Well, no, I think you're too easy with that. It's it's difficult to say what are the exact conditions that need to be there for, for instance, say now we've all taken rebirth as a human being, right? So say in the next life, again, we have the karma to take rebirth as a human being, and we have the karma to take rebirth as a human being in the United States, or in Virginia, But at the time we die, there are no suitable place. There's no suitable conditions for us to take rebirth in Virginia because there's nobody conceiving a child at that instant, right? So then it might well be that we take rebirth somewhere else.
So again, this is throwing karma. So you have to be ready to take incarnation.
Yeah. Incarnation is just the basis for the whole discussion, right? Yeah. But I agree. There's the subtle workings of karma is it just doesn't Jeff asked the question earlier about how is it that anger, one instance of anger can destroy merit. Actually in Chandrakirti says in the entrance to the middle way that one moment, and also Shantideva says in the Bodhisattva's way of life, it's also said by one other Pandit somewhere, Indian Pandit, that one instant of anger at a Bodhisattva will destroy the virtue created by generosity and ethics that you've accumulated over eons. So yeah, Jeff asked, how does that work? How does it destroy that? So I've been thinking about that during the whole lunch break, and it's not. I don't know. It's I can't really think of a convincing kind of way to explain how that happens because I also don't know. And if you just use logic and reason to think how it happens, it's just difficult to see. So it's like, like the subtle workings of karma, which the Buddha taught, like in the Jataka tales is full of it, right? And in the Pali Canon even, there's a lot of instances where the Buddha explained, like there's a famous story of Alapatra, this Naga, and the Buddha explained, like because they did this in the past, then later this result ripened. But like why exactly? Exactly how does that work? It's not even something the Buddha explained. I think it's something more like, well, he's, by purifying the mind to a very high degree, then he could just see that, that's how this cause produced this effect, later on. Yeah, one way to think about karma in general is, well, how else do you explain things happening? Like why things happening? It's like if you look for other ways of explaining, you don't really find, like, okay, is there a creator God that determines, well, okay, they're going to die here in this way at this time, and then they're going to be reborn at this, in this place in that time, or is there it's just chaos? Which means there's no pattern of cause and effect, just things happen totally randomly, which also we don't really see things happening that way. So
sort of explains the force, though. So if you look at all the merit that you created for eons and eons in the bank account,
yeah,
right? And the bank account's full,
yeah,
and you do this action,
yeah,
and it depletes the bank account. It wipes out the bank account. I guess that's a description of how heavy that action is.
yeah,
So the one moment of anger against your guru, right, is so heavy.
yeah,
But again, the way in which the bank account becomes emptied is not. I don't even know how merit creates good conditions anyway. But let's say we've got merit built up, and it should create favorable conditions for me in one way or another in my life.
yeah.
But now instead of using it to gradually create those conditions, I've wiped it out. But again, I don't see how it gets spent. I don't see how that.
Well, if you wipe it out, then there's nothing
Well, yeah.
that it doesn't get spent.
How does
it get wiped out?
How does the wiping out
happen?
Yeah,
that was your original question. Yeah, and then also it's just and it's difficult to explain. But another way to approach this, one way is to think about in some of the ways I've been talking or explaining. But another way to approach it is just by trial and error. Try in your own experience, like in FPMT, these kind of centers. Lama Yeshe, at the outset, he advised many of his students to do a 3-month Vajrasattva retreat. So in FPMT, there's a strong tradition of doing 3-month Vajrasattva retreat. So Vajrasattva is this kind of purification Buddha, where you recite a long mantra and you generate regret for non-virtuous actions you've done, and then you generate the intention to purify those by reciting this mantra and doing a visualization to go with it, like purification visualization. But I did that when I was a very new student, and I found, it seems you feel a little lighter. There's something, I don't know. It's not hard to say if it's just the what's the placebo effect or not, because it's difficult to parse that out. But doing purification, one way to analyze this is spend some serious time doing purification practices and see if you feel something different. But of course, that doesn't prove that you're purifying negative karma. It's still hard to do that, but it does give you some sense of, a little bit stronger faith that, you can see when you engage in a lot of non-virtuous actions that there's a kind of heaviness and disease with yourself, whereas you practice a lot of purification, there's a kind of space and freedom and clarity in the mind that comes. So those seems to be kind of evidence, but it's not like, 100% proof. Mm.
So, I'm sorry. No, please, go ahead.
Oh, did you have a question?
On to another topic. Follow up your...
It was a different topic as well,
Okay.
so go ahead.
Well, I want to get a better understanding of this framework of ripening karma. I think more clear to me is the initiating. I have an intention, I act on it,
Mhm.
aware of it. And the way we're talking about it, we're certainly talking about it results, or may at some point result in a particular rebirth in the desire realm. It's
Yeah.
a ripening of that karma.
Yeah.
I guess my first question about that would be that rebirth, is it necessarily, I would imagine not, a one-to-one correspondence, this act and this rebirth, or could that be the result of multiple acts
Yeah.
accumulating?
That was my question. Multiple karmas
Yeah.
resulting in an occasion for what makes a circumstance for a particular rebirth is, the circumstance, the place is right, the parents are right, the amount of money you're going to have is right, the hardship is right. There's a whole bunch of things that go into defining whether that's a positive environment to take this rebirth. It must be
Yeah.
multiple karmas that are ripening at that time in that combination to make that rebirth work.
Well, yeah, there's like you brought up, there's throwing karmas and completing karmas, right? The throwing karmas, which is mainly what we're talking about here, they primarily just determine if we're going to be thrown into which realms which realms we're going to be reborn into. And maybe, like, if we're going to be thrown into the animal realm, there could be a throwing karma to be reborn as a horse, or as a cat, or as a dog, right? And yeah, maybe to be reborn as a human, it could be there's a throwing karma to be reborn as, an American versus, Chinese or African or something like that, right? Those could be different, but then the specific experiences we have in that life are determined by what's called completing karmas. So they're less powerful karmas that just determine if we're going to get sick or not, or if we're gonna get a good education or not, or all kinds of, if when we go out to dinner tonight we're going to get a good meal or not, or something like that. There could be all kinds of smaller experiences determined by that. But your question is really, well, this throwing karma, throwing us into rebirth as a human, is that just one, each instance we take rebirth as a human, is that just one karma throwing us? Or is it several karmas combined throwing us? Actually, among Buddhist scholars, there's different views on this. Some would say it's just one. Each rebirth is only thrown by one karma. But others would say that actually there can be, you can create, for example, taking rebirth as a human is primarily the result of practicing virtue. So some might say, well, you could be practicing. There could be many instances of you practicing ethics and morality. There could be many instances of you practicing morality over a time, and all of those combine to throw you into human. And even one extremely powerful karma you create could throw many rebirths. Also, that's also possible. So, I tend to think, yeah, seems to me several instances of practicing, doing something combined could throw a rebirth. But yeah, I'm not sure. Yeah.
I had a question that, say you were born in this lifetime, and you did a lot of bad karma growing up, but then eventually you do realize that you're doing wrong, and then you get into this phase of enlightening yourself. And I guess you do reach whatever the ultimate goal is. You meditate, you do whatever. And can you get out of this life? In that lifetime itself, like, can you be bad and good in one life and then get out of this whole wheel?
In that lifetime itself, yes, yeah, you can, yeah. So yeah, I'll try to flush the answer to that out and come back to Fidel's question from much earlier. So okay, but you have straight this how it's possible for all 12 links. So in I hope you can see that, like, in this life, there's many sets of 12 links going on. Every time we create a karma, we're initiating a whole nother set of 12 links, right, in this life. And every time we have a pleasant or unpleasant feeling, it's a result of a set of the 12 links that we've initiated earlier, right? Because it's a result of having taken rebirth, developed the six sense powers, made contact with objects, and then feelings being generated, right? Our having taken rebirth this life is a result of some karma we created in the past, right? So when I was speaking about how the 12 links happen in 2 lives or 3 lives, I always started off by talking about, well, imagine we create a karma in this life, right? So then we start at the beginning of the 12 links. But another way to think about this life is in terms of, well, why did I take rebirth, as a human? So that our moment of conception was the link of rebirth, the 11th, and the 4th link, name and form, happening at the same time. And that was the result of a karma of practicing morality that we created in the past. So because we're humans now, we know we were actually, we created some really good karma in the past, because it's not easy at all to take rebirth as a human. It's a very, I mean, you look at the way, and especially a human like living in the United States, where it's, fairly peaceful, we have access to food, clothes, education, and so many other good conditions. And we have complete in our sense powers and so forth. So we can look at like the situation of animals and see how privileged we are. I mean, sometimes when we have a lot of like stress and anxiety and all kinds of things going on in our lives, we look up at the birds in the sky and see them flying around and think, oh, how peaceful it would be to be a bird. But actually, if you think in detail, but like, where do they sleep at night? What do they eat? Then watch them going around and picking insects out of the air. Like, how would you feel about doing that? Like, for lunch and dinner every day, it would not be so pleasant. And especially being afraid of being eaten by a bigger animal all the time, right? So, yeah. So another way to think about our experience is that to recognize that at the moment of conception, when we were first came into this life, that is the result of the links of ignorance, karma, and consciousness at the time of the cause, then which was ripened, so that then that karmic imprint was ripened by craving, grasping, and becoming, and then it produced that moment, that first moment of this life. And then from the first moment, in the next moment we're aging, and then in the embryo, as an embryo in the womb, our 6 senses develop, and then we make contact with objects, and then we have feelings, like in this life. So that is all. And then eventually when we die, that whole chain of 12 links will be complete. So you can see, in the midst of experiencing the results of one set of the 12 links, we're creating new sets of 12 links every day, like all the time. So where they meet and link up is, one is as we experience aging, because aging goes on. Aging goes from that link of aging. There's one link, aging and death, right? They're lumped together in one link. But the part of aging, it extends all the way from the second moment of this life until just the moment just before death, right? So all during that link, we have ignorance, we're creating more karmas, we're creating consciousness of the time of rebirth, right? We're starting whole new sets of the links, the 12 links. And especially this, we experience feelings all the time, but especially the link of feeling, that link between feeling and craving, that primarily happens at the end of this life, when we're dying, and some particular feeling of pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral gives rise to a instance of craving, grasping, and becoming, which trigger a karma to take rebirth that we've created before. Then that is where, because the feeling is the end result of one set of links, right? The very end is death, but while aging is happening, feelings are arising. So the feeling then gives rise to craving, and that craving it gives rise to is always a part of a different set of 12 links, right? Even though they're in order here, there's feeling and then followed by craving, but the feeling that is produced is always the result of one set, of one karma, and then the craving that arises from it is a set. So the feeling that is produced is a result of one karma, and so it's a product of that karma which was created before. So it's part of the set of 12 links that involve that karma. Whereas the craving the feeling produces is a set of 12 links that's activating a different karma, right? So the feeling and craving, they're always part of, the craving that arises from feeling is part of a different set of 12 links than that feeling, which is its cause. in short. Let me just explain a couple, just to kind of maybe tighten up our concept of the whole thing. Yeah. So just to repeat a little bit, these first three links: ignorance, and then I forget the term here, formative actions or karma, and then consciousness. Those three are called the projecting factors. So they because they create a karmic imprint which has the power to project a life. And then the next four, name and form, sixth sense basis, contact, and feeling, are the factors that are projected, right? And then the next three, craving, grasping, and becoming, are called actualizing factors, because they ripen that karmic imprint that has been created further, that has been created earlier, to actualize it. And then rebirth, and the link of rebirth and the link of aging and death are called the actualized factors, because they're what is immediately produced by those three actualizing factors. So, if we we think in terms of the Four Noble Truths, we can divide all of these 12 into two. Because they're all included within the truth of suffering and the truth of the causes of suffering, right? So the truth of causes of suffering is always afflictive emotions and karma, right? So which of the 12 links are included in being afflictive emotions or karma? What do you think? So let's start at the first. Ignorance, is that an afflictive emotion? Yes, right? And then the second one, karma. Well, it's karma, right? Yeah. So then the third one, consciousness, name and form, sixth sense basis, contact, and feeling. They're all the truth of suffering. They're not karma and they're not afflictive emotions. They're all part of the truth of suffering. And then the next two, craving and grasping, they're both afflictive emotions. They're related to attachment, right? So those are part of the truth of the cause of suffering. And then the last three, becoming, rebirth, aging and death, are all part of the truth of suffering. Yeah, so you can see how the first two, ignorance and karma, and then, what is it? It's number 8 and 9, I think. Yeah, craving and grasping, 8 and 9. They're part of the truth of the cause of suffering. The rest are the truth of suffering. So that's one way to divide into two. And then there's another way to divide into three groups. So this is according to Nagarjuna. Oh yeah, okay. So then we can divide into afflictions, afflictive emotions, karma, and sufferings. So we just divide out the afflictive emotions and karma. So which of the links are afflictive emotions? There's three.
Ignorance,
Yeah, ignorance.
craving, grasping.
Exactly. Ignorance, craving, and grasping. It's the first, the eighth, and the ninth. Those are afflictive emotions. And then which are karma? Are karmas. The second one, right? The second one is karma. And also the 10th, becoming. Yeah, becoming. So actually becoming, I made a mistake earlier. I said the becoming is the truth of suffering. Actually, it's the truth of the cause of suffering, because it's karma. Okay, so the second, karma, and the 10th, becoming, they are karmas.
What's the definition of becoming again?
The definition of becoming, yeah, I don't have the full definition, but it's a,
Conceptually in this
yeah.
movement.
It's basically it's a karmic imprint that's ripened such that it's about to produce. It's ripened by the force of craving and grasping, such that it's about to produce a future rebirth. Right. So it's that stage of a karmic imprint in its development, such that it's about to actually produce its result. Then there's another division in the 4, but maybe I'll skip it. It's not that helpful. Yeah. So, I don't know. Any more questions? Yes.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I don't write as fast as I should, but, so, 1 to 7 is truth of suffering, and you also said 10, oh no, 1 to 7 is truth of suffering.
No, not 1 to 7.
Yeah.
1, 2, and 3.
1 to 3.
Yeah, 1 to 3 are the truth of the cause of suffering. The second noble truth. The truth of the cause of
1 to
suffering.
3.
Yeah. And then 4, 5, 6, 7 are the truth of suffering.
Oh my goodness, what was I thinking? Okay, sorry,
No need to apologize. I know it's a little confusing.
I'm sorry, no, I just, it's right there, so, 1 to 3, truth of the cause of suffering.
Yeah.
4, 5, 6, and 7, truth of suffering.
Yeah. Then 8, 9, 10, again, truth of the cause of suffering.
Okay.
And then 11, 12, the truth of suffering. Okay?
Thank you.
Yeah. You're welcome. Any other questions?
So when you achieve, like, when you're free from samsara, I mean, this circle, so then the aggregates you have is still, it's not contaminated then. You still have aggregates, but they're not contaminated, right?
Yeah. So now I was just thinking to come back to your question. Okay, so now your question is, so when you've broken this cycle, you're free from samsara, then the contaminants you have are not contaminated, right? Well, actually, it's not quite so easy. So imagine, like, in this life, so this comes back to your question also, it's related. In this life that we work really hard, we meditate really well, and imagine we have a lot of, we've created a lot of merit in the past, we meet the perfect guru, we have perfect conditions, and we directly realize emptiness. So at that point, we're on the path of seeing, and then we quickly progress through the path of meditation, and then reach the path of no more learning, which is the state of an arhat, which means we've achieved liberation from samsara. So we achieve freedom from samsara. So do you think, but we still have the same body, right? So do you think this body we have is contaminated or not contaminated? The same body you have. Would the body you have still be subject to, like, sickness and death? Would it die?
Yeah.
Yeah, it would, yeah. Yeah, so in that case, the body we have is still contaminated. So that's why that kind of an arhat is called an arhat with remainder. There's two kinds of arhats. There's arhat with remainder and arhat without remainder. So the arhat with remainder means that they took rebirth through the force of, they took rebirth in samsara, basically. They took rebirth through the force of afflictive emotions and karma. And so the body that they have is in the nature of suffering. But on the basis of that body, because in that life they achieve the state of an arhat, so their mind, they have no afflictive emotions anymore. They've completely eliminated ignorance, which is the root of samsara, and even the imprints of that ignorance. So their mind is not part of samsara, but their body is still contaminated. So then when they die, when they abandon that body and then they take rebirth, then they're an arhat. So the arhat with remainder means that they have some remainder of samsara, which is the body they still inhabit. Right? So then when they die and their stream of consciousness is separated from that body, then they become an arhat without remainder. Right? So then it depends. If they're Hinayana arhat, then they probably take rebirth in a pure realm, in a pure land where they have, like, just a very ephemeral body made of light, and it's a product of their pure virtue,
Then why
their
are they coming
uncontaminated
back?
karma. What?
Why are they coming back?
Well, arhats don't. Arhats generally don't come. I mean, Hinayana arhats don't come back. It's bodhisattvas who come back. Yeah. So bodhisattvas, they voluntarily take rebirth in samsara again and again and again in order to benefit sentient beings. So even though, but see, on the bodhisattva path, when you achieve, well, let me make sure I get this right. I have to think first. You achieve freedom from liberation from samsara on the 8th ground. So there's 10 bodhisattva grounds. So at the time at the time you achieve the 8th ground, at that time you achieve freedom from samsara. But bodhisattvas, even from the first ground of a bodhisattva, they can emanate 100 bodies in all different places, in order to benefit sentient beings. And also from the first ground, they wouldn't, just through the force of their afflictive emotions and karma, they wouldn't take rebirth in samsara. I mean, any being, whether on the Hinayana or the Mahayana path, then once they've directly realized emptiness, then they no longer create any throwing karma. So they no longer, because they've directly realized emptiness, then they don't have afflictive emotions that are strong enough to create any throwing karma whatsoever. But and they primarily take rebirth through the force of prayer and uncontaminated merit, virtue. So once a person has directly realized emptiness, then instead of creating virtue through the force of, or that's mixed with ignorance, they create virtue that's mixed with wisdom, which is the antidote to ignorance, right? So it's like uncontaminated merit. Instead of contaminated karma, it's uncontaminated karma.
How would you know
So
a
different.
person is a bodhisattva?
How would you know? It's very difficult to know. You wouldn't really. You can only kind of guess. But if you look at the way they use their life, if you look at the way a person uses their life and the way they appear when they talk about like bodhicitta or suffering of sentient beings, then you can kind of make a good guess. Like you could make a good guess that like the Dalai Lama or Lama Zopa Rinpoche or maybe even someone like Saint Francis of Assisi or Gandhi is a bodhisattva, because they're really using their life just to benefit others without any selfish concern whatsoever. But we can't know 100%. I mean, people will always say they're not. They're not going to say. Anyone who says they are a bodhisattva, you should be very suspicious.
So like the spiritual gurus that we have these days, let's say in India or some other country, I only know about India.
Yeah.
Do you think those people are bodhisattvas?
Well, you say spiritual gurus. It's a big group of people in which there's all different kinds of people. So I think definitely some probably are, but I can't say this one is or this one's not. I have no idea. But yeah, it's kind of like you're asking an ant to assess the cats around, like which are the good cats and which are the bad cats. It's hard to tell, but whether someone's a bodhisattva or not, it's very hard to tell. But yeah, the main thing that characterizes the bodhisattva is their totally altruistic concern for the welfare of others, and their ability to tangibly benefit people, to benefit others. Definitely, there are a lot of bodhisattvas around, I'm sure. But that's a thing of faith. But logically it also makes sense that, because the way it makes sense, it requires a lot of steps to go through, a lot of reasoning to go through. But that's what I've been doing for years, and to me it all seems quite sound. It's definitely possible to generate altruism to an incredible degree. It's definitely possible to reduce, anger and selfishness and greed. And it's definitely possible for consciousness to move from life to life. So it's definitely possible for beings to develop positive qualities over many, many lives, and thereby develop those qualities to a very high degree. And then if someone really, can consciously direct their rebirth from life to life and has the sole intent, their sole intention is to benefit beings, then of course they would come and take rebirth in an ordinary form and do, engage in all kind of activities to benefit people. So when you see beings who really powerfully and seem to, with a completely pure motivation, benefiting a lot of people, then yeah, it's a pretty good guess that they might well be bodhisattvas. So So more to Fidel's question, that well, so the main ways we can escape from samsara, first of all, the main thing is to generate wisdom, because the very first link, everything arises from ignorance, right? So the main thing we need to do is to focus on generating the wisdom which eliminates that ignorance, which refutes and eliminates that ignorance. So to that effect, there's this great verse by Arya Deva in his work, The 400 Stanzas. So I'll just read it briefly to you, but it's just explaining this. It says, just as the body sends power in the body, or just as the body sends power in the body, ignorance abides in all. Ignorance abides in all the afflictive emotions. Right? So think about in our body, we have an eye sense power which enables us to be able to see things. So where is the eye sense power? It's just in our eye. It's not in our ears, not in our nose, not in our tongue. And we have a special power in our tongue which enables us to taste flavors. So where is that sense power? It's just in the tongue. It's not in other parts of the body. But we have a body sense power which enables us to feel hot and cold, to feel rough and smooth, and, to touch things. So where is that sense power? It abides everywhere, and it pervades the entire body. Right? So he uses as an analogy. It says, just as the body sends power in the body, ignorance, so in the same way, ignorance pervades all the afflictive emotions. So whenever there's anger, whenever there's afflictive pride, whenever there's afflictive doubt or craving or grasping, ignorance is also present. Ignorance pervades all of those. So it's also present in those. Therefore, by conquering ignorance, all the afflictive emotions are also conquered, right? So by eliminating ignorance with wisdom, all the other afflictive emotions are automatically destroyed or incapacitated, eliminated. Because ignorance is the basis for and pervades all of them. Yeah. So and then he goes on to say, if you see interdependent, if you see dependent and related origination, basically, if you see interdependently related arising, or interdependence, ignorance will not arise, right? So he's saying the main way to eliminate ignorance, of course, is to develop the wisdom, seeing the emptiness of a truly existent self. But the main way to see that is to think about interdependence. Recognize how, as a person, we're dependent upon causes and conditions, we're dependent upon all the parts of our body, all the parts of our mind, and we're dependent upon our imputing a self upon those parts. A self exists, but through the force of that imputation of a self. So he says, if you see interdependent arising, ignorance will not arise. Therefore, all of one's efforts should be focused here on discovering just the meaning of this advice, right? So he says, all of our efforts should be focused on reflecting on interdependence. And this is something His Holiness Dalai Lama stresses again and again. The main view, for a Buddhist, the main practice is non-harming and compassion. The main view that we need to cultivate of reality is interdependence, right? So a Sangha, so this is another set of verses that His Holiness often quotes. A Sangha is saying that all of our efforts should be focused here on eliminating ignorance by generating this view of interdependence. So the main way to be free from the samsara, the wheel of becoming, is to generate the wisdom, realizing the emptiness of a truly existent self. Because by eliminating that, then we eliminate this, craving and aversion to things. By eliminating that, we eliminate engaging in afflictive actions. But Fidel's question was really but in order to be free from samsara, do we have to somehow purify or eliminate all the karmas we've created in the infinite past? No, we don't. We all we have to do is cut the root. It's just like to cut down a tree. You don't have to pull off all the leaves and cut off all the branches. You just have to cut it from the root. So if you cut it from the root, then the whole tree falls down, without cutting off all the branches and leaves. So if all the branches and leaves are like all the infinite karmas we've created in the past, which are waiting to ripen, but if we cut samsara from the root by eliminating the ignorance, which is the root of samsara, then those karmas cannot ripen, right? So as I was talking about, like an arhat with remainder, someone who has, directly realized emptiness and then meditated on that and eliminated the ignorance, grasping at true existence, and the imprints of that, and the seeds of that ignorance, I should say. If they've eliminated ignorance and the seeds of that ignorance, but they still, all the karmas they've created in the past are still in their continuum, but those cannot ripen, because what is required for a karma to ripen? Afflictive emotions. Like here in the 12 links, what are the actualizing factors? Remember, are craving and grasping. So if one has eliminated ignorance, remember in the center, craving and grasping are forms of attachment. Attachment is represented by the rooster, right? The rooster arises from the pig. So attachment arises from ignorance. So if ignorance isn't there, then attachment can't arise. It's impossible, right? So if attachment can't arise, then craving and grasping can arise. If craving and grasping can't arise, then there's no way for all those karmic seeds we've accumulated in the past to ripen. They're like seeds that'll never meet moisture or never meet soil. The conditions for them to ripen will never exist. So in order to be free from karma, in short, we don't have to purify all the karma and work out all the karma we've created in the past. We just have to cut the root of samsara, which is ignorance. Which is why it's extremely important to correctly identify the root of samsara, which according to Shakyamuni Buddha is kind of the thing that he did and no one before him did, right? That's the uncommon thing about Shakyamuni Buddha. Because you look at the life of the Buddha, he grew up as a prince and then left the home to seek a path to freedom from birth, old age, sickness, and death. And then, but before, wisely, he didn't just go off on his own into the forest. First, he went to meditate with the most renowned spiritual teachers of his day, whose names I can't remember, but they were renowned, Hindu yogis of the day, and they taught him how to develop the first and the fourth and up to the highest level of concentration, meditative concentration within samsara, which is called the peak of samsara, or it's called not nothing and not something, or not existing and not existing. But so he learned from those teachers how to get up to that very subtle level of concentration, but he found that still he's not free from the influence or being under the control of afflictive emotions and karma. So then he went off on his own and meditated for 6 years alone in the jungle along the Naranjana River. And then, so it said, at the time of his enlightenment, he realized his 12 links of dependent arising and realized, I correctly identified the root of samsara and generated the wisdom eliminating that. Right? So that's a little bit. It's a little bit of a. It's a very abbreviated story, but in short, for us, the most important thing is to recognize that the whole 12 links arise from the first link's ignorance. But then also that between feeling and craving is also very important, because that's what connects one set of the 12 links to a successive set of 12 links.
It's about like it took Buddha 3 countless great eons to achieve Buddhahood, right?
According to the sutra.
Yes.
Yeah.
So 3 countless great eons. That means like maybe we're on the path to maybe we've been going
A long time.
a long time.
Yeah.
So we need to all those stuff
Yeah.
So still got a long time.
Yeah, that's one reason. Many people choose not to strive for enlightenment, but just to strive for the state of an arhat, a hinayana arhat, because that you can achieve in, 1 or 2, 3, up to 16 lifetimes. You can achieve much more. It's much easier to achieve state of arhat. So the difference between full enlightenment and state of hinayana arhat is that hinayana arhat, although they won't take rebirth in samsara, they don't have omniscient mind. A fully enlightened being, they have no obscurations or no obstacles to knowing anything. So in that way, the mind is omniscient. They can know anything, and also, I mean, they have perfected, well, their main attitude is bodhicitta, or great compassion. Their main driving force is compassion, wishing to relieve all sentient beings from suffering. So for a Hinayana Arhat, that's not a prime. They have compassion, but not that degree of compassion. So the motivation to achieve Hinayana Arhat is merely to be free from samsara for oneself alone, right? So it's a much lower state of realization, although it's still freedom from samsara.
So is it possible to for like someone who's studying, it's possible to overcome ignorance like this lifetime?
Yeah, it's possible. Yeah,
So-
I mean, in Shakyamuni Buddha's lifetime, hundreds of people achieved the state of an arhat.
But so if there is a condition, it's so easy then. If the conditions are there,
Well, it's not that easy, though.
eh?
It's
No,
difficult.
it will be easy because if you have
For us?
Yeah, I mean if you have the conditions.
Yeah, if you have all the conditions, but where do you find those?
That's what I'm asking. I don't know. That's the
Yeah.
question I'm asking. How do I get that? I mean, how do we get that?
Yeah.
How do we get that?
Well, I mean, the example Buddha showed was one becoming ordained and living. I mean, the example that Buddha showed, because he was showing people by his life, like what are the best conditions to achieve freedom from samsara, right? So, leaving the home life, living the life of an ascetic means having very simple clothes, simple food, changing your identity, so you're not identifying yourself as a householder, remaining celibate, and devoting all your time to study and meditation. Right? Basically, it's that. So that's why, I mean, that's how the ordained sangha arose. I mean, Buddha himself was the first ordained person, and then during his lifetime, all of his most serious students, almost all of them, not all of them, but there were some kings and some merchants and stuff who also achieved the state of an arhat as a layperson. So clearly that's possible. But for most people, it's much easier to do by giving up lay life and giving up all the demands on your time and energy that, responsibility to spouse and family and kind of lay friends demands. Yeah. But then, of course, you have to have qualified guidance, qualified teacher. And then also, it also depends on having a lot of merit. I mean, you can imagine, like, what kind of merit would be required to take rebirth and live at the time Shakyamuni Buddha did, and to meet him personally and receive guidance from him personally? Like, it's not easy. It's just like the Dalai Lama now. I mean, how many of us can just, get a personal interview with the Dalai Lama every month to receive meditation instruction? Like, it's really difficult. Like, but there are people who do. There are some people who have the merit to live in Dharamsala, be. You don't have to be Tibetan, but be in serious meditation retreat around the Dalai Lama. And I mean, now it happens less because he's so busy. But back in the 70s, 80s, 90s, then there were retreatants in Dharamsala who could every month go receive personal instruction from someone, like that. So it also requires merit. But it's not like just because we don't have the conditions or we don't feel like we can really devote ourselves to that kind of intense practice this life, we shouldn't be, we shouldn't feel bad or give up or something, but rather think, well, in this life, it's worked out that, my life is like this. I have these responsibilities and I have these kind of dispositions. So for me, it's more realistic just to lead this kind of life. But in the future, I aspire that, I can meet spiritual teachers again and meet better conditions where it's easier for me to practice. Right? That's why, the whole, in China, there's a Pure Land practice. It's all based on that kind of thinking, that in this life it's so difficult to really make progress on the spiritual path. But if we take rebirth in a Pure Land, which is an environment that's created through the force of the merit and prayers of an enlightened being, like Amitabha Buddha, and actually every Buddha has a Pure Land. But we can make prayers, if we create the karma and make a special connection with that Buddha by remembering them and reciting their name, and accumulating merit and dedicating it towards taking rebirth in the Pure Land, then when we die away from this life, it's possible to take rebirth in that Pure Land. And in the Pure Land, then, there's no sex, no non-virtue, you receive teachings all the time, and it's very easy to generate realizations. So some Buddhists also practice with exactly that kind of thought, that it's difficult to achieve realization in this life, but if I take rebirth in the right conditions, then I can easily generate realizations. So it's also it's also a valid sort of path. But in any case, we need to think long term. I mean, it's so antithetical to our ordinary Western way of seeing. You know, we usually just think of just this life. Like, if I don't do something just in this life, then it's all over. But in the Buddhist perspective, it's totally different. It's thinking like long term. You know, practice like a flowing river, just continually. You know, think how long the river, what's the Potomac River has been flowing. Like, it's just continually flowing, like day and night. So we should try to practice Dharma, like, and from generation to generation. George Washington crossed the same Potomac River, right, and it's still flowing. And we're just a young country, right? So think like practicing virtue and aspiring to develop greater and greater spiritual realizations. Not, of course, in this life, but then in next life, and next life, and next life, and gradually. Then. But if we have that long-term perspective, then things happen very fast. If we have a short-term perspective and think, oh, if I don't do it in this life, then it's never going to happen, then we easily get anxious and kind of frustrated. So, yeah. What do you think? It's already 3:30. Shall we? Yeah. Maybe we should conclude here. Yeah, I don't know. We could do some meditation. We could have discussion group, but I don't know. I kind of like to give you more of a Sunday afternoon, just holiday. This is very difficult stuff. I've been explaining a lot. You've asked very good questions. And we've basically, I think we've given a clear picture. We've gotten to a clear picture of what's going on here. So why don't we conclude with this? There's actually, you see in the illustration at the top right-hand corner, there are two verses in Tibetan. So these two verses are always supposed to go with this illustration. Apparently it's a sutra that the Buddha actually taught. So you see at the very top of the picture, on the right-hand side there's depicted Shakyamuni Buddha, and he's pointing his finger to these two verses on the other side of the illustration. So he's sort of standing above the wheel of life represents that he's achieved nirvana. He's achieved freedom from samsara. And then him pointing to those two verses, he's indicating how to think about and how to meditate on this illustration. So it's said that in the past, during Shakyamuni Buddha's life, a painting of the Buddha was to be sent to a king, King Udrayana is his name. And before it was sent, so the Buddha was going to send a painting to this king, a painting of himself. But before it was sent, the 12 dependent arisings in forward and reverse progressions were written in verse at the bottom. So that's different. Then the king memorized this description of the 12 links of dependent arising, and then meditated all night, and at dawn he achieved the state of an Arya being. Okay. But anyway, this verse in Tibetan is translated like this. So the verse says, undertaking this and leaving that, enter into the teaching of the Buddha. Like an elephant in a mud hut, destroy the forces of the Lord of Death. Those who, with thorough conscientiousness, practice this taming doctrine, will, having totally abandoned the wheel of birth, bring suffering to an end. Okay? So I'll read it again and explain a little bit. Undertaking this and leaving that, enter into the teaching of the Buddha. Like an elephant in a mud hut, destroy the forces of the Lord of Death. Those who, with thorough conscientiousness, practice this taming doctrine, will, having totally abandoned the wheel of birth, bring suffering to an end. Okay. So in the first line, undertaking this and leaving that. Undertaking this means adopt or take up and practice the teachings of the Buddha. Not because of the teachings of the Buddha, but because they describe the truth as it is, the way we are born and die. And leaving that means leave worldly activities, leave behind worldly concerns, worldly activities. Enter into the teaching of the Buddha. And then he gives an example, like an elephant in a mud hut, or an elephant in a thatch hut. So imagine an elephant goes into a thatch hut. So the thatch hut here represents samsara. Imagine an elephant goes into it, it totally destroys it, like very easily. Because the thatch hut is very flimsy, the elephant is very strong. So oneself should be very strong in your understanding and practice, and destroy samsara, which is actually, it's like a house of cards, because it's all based on a fundamentally mistaken foundation, which is ignorance, and a misperception of the way things exist. Then it's very flimsy, actually. So like an elephant in a mud hut, destroy the forces of the Lord of Death. So the forces of the Lord of Death are afflictive emotions and karma. Those who, with thorough conscientiousness, so by being mindful, continually mindful all the time, practice this taming doctrine. So practice this, the doctrine here means the teachings of the Buddha, and they're called the taming or the subduing or the pacifying doctrine because they bring peace to the mind. Right? They bring peace to the mind and peace to one's life. Therefore they tame afflictive forces, they tame destructive forces. Practice this taming doctrine. Having totally abandoned the wheel of birth, bring suffering to an end. Okay. So that's what those verses say. So, okay. So if there are if there are no more questions, then we'll conclude with some verses of dedication from in the prayer book. Let's read the general dedication prayers on page 235. Page 235 is the general dedication prayers. Great. So first, just think about all the merit we've created together yesterday and today. And rejoice. Think how wonderful it is. And then bring to mind all the merit created by all of our spiritual teachers, His Holiness Dalai Lama, Lama Zopa Rinpoche, Khyentse Rinpoche Losang Jampa, and others. And think how wonderful it is, the way they benefit sentient beings. We can also think of all the merits created by the whole FPMT organization, by supporting many, many charitable causes in different places, hospitals, schools, homes for the aged, offering food to many monks and nuns, supporting the creation of many holy objects, and making countless offerings at Lama Zopa Rinpoche at different centers around the world, and Lama Zopa Rinpoche's different houses and quarters around the world, making extensive offerings to many holy objects. And people seeing and experiencing like statues, stupas, tankas, in so many places around the world. Think of all the merit and rejoice. And then in short, think of all the merit created by all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas and all sentient beings everywhere, in the past and the present, and rejoice. So imagine all this merit heaped together, then we dedicate that the Buddha Dharma may continue to flourish and spread. Where it has spread, may it not decline. Where it has not spread before, may it increase and grow and bring boundless benefit to beings. And especially may this Dharma Center, Guru Samaja Center in Fairfax, continue to flourish and grow and be able to offer the Buddhist teachings to more and more beings by receiving all the necessary conditions to do so, financial and volunteer support, in harmony among all of the volunteers and so forth. And then may the lives of our holy gurus, as well as Dalai Lama, Lama Zopa Rinpoche, and others, be long and stable. And may all their holy wishes be perfectly fulfilled, exactly in accordance with their wishes. And may all of our actions only be pleasing to their holy minds. And may we create the causes to have fully qualified Mahayana gurus among us in this life and all future lifetimes up until we achieve enlightenment. And then also everywhere in the world, especially like places like Syria, I think Yemen, other countries where there's violent conflict, Libya, May all of this violent conflict and war quickly come to an end. Everywhere in the universe, especially our planet Earth, where there's famine, starvation, hunger, and disease, may the causes for all of that to quickly be eliminated, come together, and may all beings be free from those sufferings. May there be elimination of all domestic and other forms of abuse, physical and mental abuse. And also may we stop destroying our natural environment, but learn to preserve the purity and well-being of our oceans, and rivers, streams, forests, and other natural environments, so that they can, for a long time in the future, sustain us and other and all the animal species. So then let's dedicate these verses. Due to the merits of these virtuous actions, may I quickly attain the state of a Guru Buddha and lead all living beings without exception into that enlightened state. May the supreme jewel, bodhicitta, that has not arisen, arise and grow, and may that which has arisen not diminish, but increase more and more. Just as the brave Manjushri and Samantabhadra too realize things as they are, I too dedicate all these merits in the best way, that I may follow their perfect example. I dedicate all these roots of virtue, with the dedication praised as the best, by the victorious ones thus gone over 3 times, so I might perform good works. I dedicate whatever virtues I have ever collected, for the benefit of the teachings and of all sentient beings, and in particular for the essential teachings of perfect, pure Losamdrakpa to shine forever. May we not arouse heresy even for a second in the actions of the glorious Guru. May we regard whatever actions are done as pure. With this devotion, may we receive the blessings of the Guru in our hearts. In all my lives, through the victorious one, Lama Tsongkhapa, acting in person as the Mahayana Guru, may I never turn aside even for an instant from the excellent path praised by the victorious ones. In whatever way you appear, glorious Guru, with whatever retinue, lifespan, and pure, whatever noble and holy name you take, may I and others attain only these. Every supreme and mundane attainment follows solely upon pure devotion to you, my Savior. Seeing this, I give up my body and even my life. Please bless me to practice only what will please you. May the glorious Guru's lives be long and stable. May all beings equally in the extent of space have happiness. May I and others without exception accumulate merit and purify negativities. And may we be blessed to quickly attain Buddhahood. Only by the kindness of my Gurus have I met the unequal teachings of Buddha. I dedicate all this merit so that all migratory beings without exception may be guided in the future by kind and holy Gurus. Until Samsara ends, may the teaching that benefits not be moved away by the wind of evil superstitions. May the whole world always be filled with people who have understood and found stable faith in the teachings. What the Supreme Guide has, by boundless good fortune, ardently made the core of his practice, and therefore accomplished. May it spread by every method, and thus increase day and night. Due to all these merits, may all the Father and Mother sentient beings have all happiness, and may all the lower realms be empty forever. Wherever there are bodhisattvas, may all their prayers be accomplished immediately. May I cause all this by myself alone. Due to all the merit accumulated by the 3 times by myself and others, may those beings who merely see, hear, remember, touch, or talk to me be freed in that very second from all their sufferings and abide in happiness forever. Whatever suffering sentient beings experience, may it ripen upon me. Whatever merit its result of happiness I have accumulated, may others experience it. Why don't we go ahead and read these additional dedications by Lama Zopa on the next page, 240. Due to the merits accumulated over 3 times by myself and all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas which are empty from Brahmasana, May I, who is empty from its own side, achieve the state of enlightenment, which is empty from its own side, and lead all sentient beings who are empty from their own side to that state as quickly as possible by myself alone. Because of these merits, may my actions never cause even the slightest harm to any sentient being. Instead, may they bring only the greatest of benefit. Whatever suffering or happy life I experience, may it be only of the greatest benefit to others, causing them to achieve enlightenment as quickly as possible. Like Lama Tsongkhapa, may I be able to offer extensive benefits, equaling the limitless sky, to all sentient beings and the teachings of Buddha, from now on in all my future lives, by having all the qualities of Lama Tsongkhapa within me. Because of the past, present, and future merit created by me and by the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas and sentient beings, may I, my family, disciples, and all sentient beings be able to actualize completely in this very lifetime Lama Tsongkhapa's path of unified sutra and tantra, which is like pure refined gold. May this pure teaching of Lama Tsongkhapa spread in all directions and flourish forever. Because of all the merits of the 3 times created by me and all the Buddhas, Bodhisattvas, and other sentient beings, may there be no wars, famines, disease, quarreling, fighting, or unhappy minds. May there be great prosperity, and may everything needed be easily obtained. May all the human beings in the world be guided by spiritual leaders teaching only Dharma, and may everyone enjoy the happiness of Dharma. May everyone have perfect conditions and have only compassion and love for each other in the mainstreams, and may they only benefit and never harm each other. May I and all others be able to live lives of pure moral conduct, like Lama Tsongkhapa himself, train the mind in bodhicitta, and live in pure view and conduct. In this way, we may be able to complete our lives without corrupting the pure wisdom of the second Buddha's teachings. Due to the merits of the 3 times created by myself and others, and by the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, may I and my family members and all the students and benefactors of the organization and all sentient beings be able to meet perfectly qualified Mahayana virtuous friends in all our future lives. From our side, may we always see them as enlightened, and always perform only actions most pleasing to their holy minds. May we always fulfill their wishes. Okay, so we'll stop there. So if you'd like to add any other prayers, you can bring to mind. So may all those prayers be accomplished exactly in accordance with your virtuous wishes and aspirations. Okay, so thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you very much.